Welcome everyone to the part 4 of this Diablo 4 style ability tray tutorial series. Now in this tutorial today we're going to take a look at how we can finish off with the cooldown timer and also generate these abilities so we can actually pick up to add to our inventory. So let's get started. First, let's get started with setting up this cooldown time. Now that we have the other cooldown function set up already, we can borrow this function to set up the cooldown time as well. And it's very simple. You just click on these two functions up here because we're already setting up the default time. And we're going to bring it down here and we're going to set it to set text. And we're also going to take the remaining cooldown and then just plug it in here. And that should basically help us. Oh, sorry. Not equal to 0 is what we had originally. Now there's going to be a problem with this, and you will see what that is in just a second. Problem number 1 is the actual number is a decimal. We don't need a decimal. We need a whole number. That's going to be a quick fix. Problem number 2 is the timer doesn't stop. The reason why the timer doesn't stop is because we're going down in incrementals of 0.1. It's so fast that the Boolean is not triggering when it comes to 0, and it's going past 0 so quickly that the function doesn't trigger. That means when it goes below 0, negative 0.01 is technically not 0, so that means it's still going to be true. So to actually make it work properly, we're going to have to change the way that the logic is done. So we're going to delete this, and we're going to drag off of this and say promote here, and we're going to say start cooldown question mark. We're going to put a start cooldown question mark here. Originally, we're going to make it so that the start cooldown is going to be true. That means the function is going to trigger as soon as it starts. Now we need a way to turn it off. The way to turn it off is when the remaining cooldown gets to 0 or less than 0, we want to turn it off. To do that, it's pretty straightforward. Grab this start cooldown. Actually, we want to before doing that, we will just get this remaining cooldown. And we're going to check, before we even run this entire code, we're going to check to see if this is less than or equal to 0. Now, if this is less than or equal to 0, we're going to do a branch here. So there's a true and a false in this branch. Now, if the remaining cooldown is less than or equal to 0, then the true will trigger. If it is not equal to 0 or less than 0, then the false will trigger. Now, when it's not less than 0 or equal to 0, we want it to continuously keep counting down. But as soon as it reaches 0 or not, 0, we need to stop the cooldown, and then we can stop the looping here by setting the start cooldown to false. Let's see how this works. So there's the cooldown. It's going down. Looks good. And that should stop right there. There it is. See how it goes to 0.01 really quickly? That is less than 0. That's why our previous code was not working properly. Now let's fix that decimal. Now the decimal point fixing is very simple. You delete this to text fold, so text to float. Take this and then just do a round up, right? A round. And then now when you add this here, let's move this down, move this here, just to keep it nice and tidy. That's all I'm doing. Now if I were to put in all of this, you'll notice when it comes to 0, it stops. And ta-da, and stops. So we can do one more thing, is that when it gets to 0, we don't want that timer 0 to always be there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and here where we are setting the text to 99, we can actually make it so that we don't need to set up this text anymore because we no longer need that functionality, but we will actually maintain the visibility of this cooldown here. So I can take this cooldown time and then I can say set visibility and plug this in here, plug this in here. I'm going to say when you start hidden. And only when the cooldown is initiated, as long as the remaining cooldown is less than 0, we want to make sure that this cooldown image is, we can just copy this, right? We're going to set it to visible every time. Visible. And once this actually gets to 0 or less than 0, we want to just hide it away. So let's grab all of this code and drag it down a little bit just to make some room here. And same thing, grab this and paste it. Grab this code, and then now we make it into hidden. So what this is going to do is, well, you can actually see it. Now when I press C, when it gets to 0, it's going to disappear. And this is going to make it so that your actual ability is now ready to use. Awesome. So let's clean this up really quickly and make this just a little bit higher and move this up a little bit. So that's it for the functionality of the cooling. Now we don't have to do this in it anymore because we need to call this function whenever the actual ability is used. Only when it's used, we want to now call this init, and then this initiating function, this cooldown function, will then trigger and make sure that everything is done correctly. Now, one more thing that we can actually do is once the cooldown is completed, we could also send out a Boolean or kind of like, hey, the cooldown is done, which is technically this right here, which is start cooldown. We can always get the start cooldown and see, hey, is the start cooldown true or false? If it is true, then we want to make it so that the cooldown is active. We can say the cooldown is active. If it is false, we know the cooldown is not active. Now, originally, when the ability gets created, it's going to be true. But once we set it to false, there's no way to make it true again. So what we're going to do is, as long as this is, oh, sorry. As long as the remaining cooldown is not less than, which is the false function, we're going to go ahead and then we're going to do a set function here, and then we're going to say start cooldown is true. So this way, when it runs for the first time, it's going to keep setting the cooldown to true. And yeah, actually, we can just set this up here. So every time this cooldown function triggers, it's going to set itself to true. And then this will allow it to actually run it through the entire function. So that fixes the entire problem. Okay, so that's that for the cooldown function. Now we can move on to getting the actual ability. So this is acquiring ability. Now in your game, you can choose to get the ability by either having the player complete a skill tree, or you can get it as a reward, or you can actually have it done as a pickup, like they find it in a chest somewhere on the side, right, in a hidden cave or whatever. So for this purpose of this tutorial, we're not going to go through the skill tree or anything like that. I'm just going to make a simple actor, and then I'm going to make it so that whenever I go and walk over the actor, I will get the ability. Okay, so inside of the ability folder, I'm going to go ahead and create a blueprint class and call it the actor. And this one is going to be BP, oh, boopy, wow. Ability underscore base. This is the base ability. Now you can just make duplicates of it, and you whatever functionality that you set up in the ability base, it's going to be duplicated for the rest of your child. So we will put all the important functions inside of the base, and then when you create a child blueprint just like this, it's going to inherit all of the functionality that this base has, and also you can modify this to have even more functionality. Which we're going to look into details in a different video as when we do the abilities video tutorial. But for now, for the purpose of this tutorial, just to keep it simple, I'm going to go ahead and delete this scene root. Actually, before that, I need to have a empty scene, right? And I'm going to go ahead and delete the scene root, drag this and drop it over here. So that's the scene. So that little thing is gone. I'm going to make it into a little circle. Oh, sorry. what is this? I think it's a cone. Yeah, cone. Doesn't matter. I'm just putting something there so that I can actually see what it is when I actually collect it. Location, I'm just going to put it all at 0, 0, 0. Okay, and then also we're going to put in a trigger, which is going to be a box trigger. Like I mentioned before, this is not an ideal way to get this done because, well, it can be because it could just be an ability that's sitting on the floor for the player to pick up. That's how I'm going to do it to acquire the ability, and you can do it however you like to do it in your graph. Now, while selecting the box, we're going to go down, quickly take a look at the collision, and it's going to say overlap all dynamic. We can actually click on this box collision, right click, and then add event and say component begin overlap. Now, component begin overlap is basically whenever this somebody walks through this collision, it's going to trigger this event. So for example, if I go ahead and print it and I say hello, and now what I can do is I can go into my level, drag and drop this right in front of me there. Let me just make sure that it's there. I'll stop. Okay, and now whenever I go and touch it, oh, give me 1 second. Make this a little bit bigger so I can actually touch it. Okay, I hope that fixes it. Let me also here overlap all dynamic. And instead of that, I'm going to say custom. Ignore the camera here and overlap. Let's see. Let's see if this works. It should say hello as soon as I touch it. There it is. Okay, it was just a size. I did the camera because sometimes when you go through it, it might clip through the item. So that's why I did it like, ignore camera. Same thing you can do with the cone as well. You can make it so that under collision, it says block all dynamic. We can make it custom and we just say ignore the camera alone. So now if I walk over it, it's not very important, but I'm just trying to show you. So see, when the camera is there, it's going to go right through it instead of having to like bounce around and stuff like that. Okay. So now every time I touch it, it's going to say hello, hello. So that's all we're going to do to pick it up. Now, what we're going to do is we need to know what actor is actually touching this box. We only want to pick it up if it is our actor. So we know our actor is the third person, and we know that only when we touch it, we want to get it. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag off of this other actor, and we're going to cast to that third person character. And then what this does is, if it is the third, it's basically a check. Who's touching it? If it is the third person character, it's true. Then we're going to say delay, like a small quick delay, and we're going to say destroy actor. That's all we're going to do. So if I go ahead and touch it, 2 seconds and it gets destroyed. Very well. It's 2 seconds again. It doesn't have to be, it has to be like 0.1, right? It's just so that it has enough time to trigger the function that we're going to do, and then it gets destroyed. Because if it gets destroyed right away, then sometimes it doesn't allow us to trigger that function right away. So I actually always like to have that 0.1, like a 0.1 delay there. So what do you want to do when we touch overlap this? We want to actually pick up an ability, right? So we know in the player HUD, we're calling the function, in the player character, we're calling the function every time we press C. What if we just do it every time we pick up, every time we touch that overlap? So I can go back to my third person character, delete this, and then now I'm going to create a custom event. And I'm going to say add, pick up ability. And every time this function is called, it's going to pick up an ability. So here, back to my base, before I destroy the actor, I'm going to go ahead and say pick up ability. right? So when I walk over the box, it's going to go check to make sure that it's me. It's a third person character. And then it's going to go to the third person blueprint and it's going to say, hey, pick one ability up. And we already set up the functionality by pressing C. Now we're just going to make it so that we're actually picking it up. So if I walk over, I get an ability at the very bottom. Now we see a problem is that the cooldown icon is already on top of it. So let's fix that really quickly. Same thing as what we did previously. It's about making it visible and non-visible. So we're going to go here. Once we set up the mesh, we're going to take the cooldown image, not the brush, and we're going to say set visibility. Make sure it's a function. And then we're going to say hidden. And here, once it's set to 0, when it gets to 0, it automatically gets hidden anyways. So what we're going to do, oh yeah, so we can do one more thing here. Instead of actually hiding it, we're gonna go and take the material instance of that of this, which is basically this right here, and we're going to go set scalar parameter by value, and we're gonna take this cooldown, and we're gonna set the value to 0. This way, it will when it gets constructed, it's gonna get constructed with the value 0, which is technically not in cooldown mode, right? And when we start the cooldown function, we want to set the value to 1, so it starts the cooldown. So we can do it right here. Let's move this cooldown function a little further down. Once we set up the cooldown, we want to set up the scalar now to 1. Right, and we need to cooldown material, set that as our target here, and make this to 1. So only when the cooldown function gets initialized, when we use the abilities, when the cooldown function gets initialized, then it's going to bring itself to visibility and it's going to go down. Out here, we can see we are going to set it down to 0, so which is great. So when we start the function, it's going to go back to 1 again. So if I test that really quickly, and if I go and pick up this material, it's going to start with a fully functional ability. And only when I use the ability, it's going to do the grayscale, go through the timer, and then it's going to disappear again. All right, everyone, I think that's a great spot for us to stop and move on to the next part. Again, thank you very much for joining me today to continue on with this Diablo 4 ability tray tutorial series. Again, if you like this video, if this video helped you in any way, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, as it will definitely help the channel grow and allows me to make more and more videos like this. And if you have any questions or comments regarding my videos, please feel free to share them in the comment section below, and I'll definitely make sure that I answer all of them. Have yourself a great evening. Bye-bye now.